welcome. This is Roland Mangold. I'm the managing editor of LiDAR magazine. We're still watching. People are still coming into to the session. But we were going to get things started because we've got a full program. We at the magazine, at LiDAR magazine, we're astounded at the variety of 3D scanning applications we're seeing across the LiDAR industry. Of course, we live in a 3D world, and it's just a matter of time before this 3D world is captured digitally. And laser scanning is probably, if not the best, certainly one of the best ways of doing that. And it's just a question of who's going to be doing this 3D capturing. But the potential and the opportunities are unlimited, and we're really very excited about this topic. LiDAR magazine has always been all about promoting technology adoption, and today's webinar format is an excellent way of covering the finer points. We've got lots of exciting things planned for the new year at LiDAR magazine. We've got webinars like this one. Spatial media's vast network of communication vehicles of blogs, magazines such as American Surveyor, LiDAR magazine, and GISuser.com has the greatest depth and breadth covering LiDAR, laser scanning, mapping, GIS surveying, BIM, capturing reality. We've got lots to connect and lots to share. Our webinar for today, Getting into the Game, the Business of 3D Laser Scanning, is sponsored by Faro. So join us for an interactive discussion on how easy it has become to incorporate 3D laser scanning into daily workflows and how quickly firms can expect to see a return on investment. We'll address both hardware and software strategies while emphasizing the importance of building a team with the right mindset. Our panel of 3D imaging experts includes Lukas Duruttya of DiCarlo Precision Instrument, Jonathan Sever of Pennoni Associates, and Shaheed Smith of SAS Geospatial. We're going to be covering team building, who's best for key jobs and why, implementation, how not to upset the apple cart, and choosing the right software and equipment. Many attendees are still logging on, but again, let me thank our sponsor, Faro, for making this webinar possible. Now, allow me to introduce our presenters in the format for today. Lukas Duruttya is the Director of 2D and 3D Measurement, Training, and Technical Support for DiCarlo Precision Instrument. He is known around the world for his inventive ways to utilize and implement 3D laser scanning. Jonathan Sever is HDLS, High Definition Laser Scanning Project Manager for the Pennoni, Newark, Delaware office, and has over 18 years of engineering and surveying experience in the AC industry. His HDLS experience has been presented in various trade publications and conferences, as most notably at Autodesk University 2015 on scanning and analyzing above-ground bulk fuel storage tanks using Faro Point Sense plant. Shaheed Smith, PLS, is a licensed land surveyor in Pennsylvania and Delaware with over 20 years of experience and principal at SAS Geospatial based in Philadelphia region. He currently serves as Vice President of the Pennsylvania Society of Land Surveyors, Board of Directors, and is Chair of the Strategic Planning Committee. Today's webinar will be a panel discussion instead of a single presenter. We're going to be covering three core areas critical to laser scanning investment. Time, which will be covering training and proficiency. Capital, we'll be looking at equipment and software. And people, where we'll be analyzing the field and office staff that are going to be required. This session will be recorded. The recording will be available shortly, and the link will be sent by email. You can also download the slide deck now in PDF form. You should be able to find the link on the screen. Please submit questions for the Q&A anytime. Be sure to stick around for the Q&A session at the end. And without further ado, I'd like to pass things off to John Sever. John?
Thanks, Roland. We're going to get our slides up here in a second. There we go. Welcome, everyone. I want to take a moment here and talk to you about your market. Well, it's relatively simple. You look at what you're doing already. That's going to be your market for laser scanning. Basically, it comes down to how are you taking your measurements today, and how can you integrate a laser scanner into that process. If you're still dragging a tape around, this may be the better option for you. It comes down to a time savings. You're going to pick up that much more detail by laser scanning than dragging a conventional tape measure or a total station around the site. So your market is what you're doing right now. The best way to exploit your market is find your niche. Find your niche in that market and go with it. A lot of times people are trying to figure out, well, there's so much to scan. What do I focus on? Well, focus on what you're good at. So take your scanner and just apply it to what you're doing right now. And many times that'll save you money and generate a larger profit.
Yeah, this is Shaheed. It's definitely important to find your niche, because I think at some point you're trying to do too much and get into too many markets. You know, that may be a mistake because you're not an expert in one field and you're trying to do too much at one time, and a lot of those operations typically kind of, you know, fail or get off to the wrong start.
Yeah. Just looking here at the slide real quick, I mean, a lot of times you can see the various activities that are going on. I mean, one example is the MEP environment that you see down in the lower right-hand corner. I mean, conventional MEP guys would just go in with a clipboard and a tape measure. Nowadays, we can go in, we can scan that room, and by scanning it, we'll pick up data plates, we'll pick up pipe diameters, we'll actually pick up the physical location of all the mechanical equipment there versus what you could actually sketch on that notepad. So the time savings is what is really going to generate that profit for you. The benefits of scanning. The major benefit is the amount of data that you're collecting in a short period of time. The nice thing about it is you don't have to keep going back into the field to keep collecting that data. You just go back, you harvest the information you need from that point cloud, and from that, you're going to have that time savings. And it's like everything else. Time is money in this industry. So the faster you collect it, the more amount of data that you collect, the more money you're going to make.
All right, guys, this is Lukas. My forte over here at the company with DiCarlo is we go out and we actually educate companies and educate customers on when to get into laser scanning, how to get into laser scanning. And if you look at the title of this slide, it's become apparent that it is not as easy as you would think to convince people, or I guess management in the company, to embrace the 3D scanning. And I always think that little picture says it all, where it's, you know, if you are set in your ways and your company has been successful for over 20 to 30 years, historically doing the same thing over again with the traditional measuring techniques, and you're good at it, of course, you will find a lot of feedback, and actually like a hurdle that you will have to tackle when you're talking to your clients or your partners, or obviously your customers, who would say, well, if we did this successfully for that period of time, why would we change? And it's also a great time to mention where this more useful or familiar to whoever's listening. Imagine when you didn't have a plotter. Before you had a plotter, you do hand drafting everything, and it's still a valid way of doing everything nowadays. It just takes time. So with 3D laser scanning, you are essentially using modern technology to replace a lot of stuff in the field, take measurements much faster, and be efficient, and not just in the traditional way where you're, you know, measuring and doing what you did before, but you're actually expanding your horizon, and you're allowing your company to, you know, be cutting edge. Essentially, get into a technology that is not just for the past and the present, but something into the future. everyone will eventually be doing this. So if you get into it right now and you figure it out, you will be ahead of most of the companies that are doing any kind of data capture. And I don't think you as a owner or potential owner would want to be left behind. As John mentioned before, this is all about time. Time is money in this sense. So if you can bring up something like that at a meeting and talking to your clients that 3D scanning might be something that you would be using, emphasize that. The next emphasis is definitely on safety. When you're using 3D laser scanning, we'll be talking about it all day today, of course, but it's about taking all measurements of absolutely everything that you can see in your environment, which is, from many people's perspective, too much information. But you can never have too much information. Let me give you an example. For a safety perspective, we had a customer that asked us to create as-built floor plans, pretty much an auto survey also, but let's stick to the manufacturing plant. They were talking about, can you provide us with accurate as-builts of a manufacturing facility? Manufacturing facility, obviously, from a safety standpoint, is something that they either have to stop production or they have to slow something down. They have to give you perimeters, where to work, where not to work, while you're lingering, while you're taking measurements, while you're working there with your field crew, which might not be 1 or 2 or 3, it might be more people. So you impact their operations by a huge deal. And when we proposed saying, okay, you know what, you have about a 600,000 square foot building over here, let us go in there and actually show you what the scanning would do for you. And in the safety field, what that did was we eliminated traditionally that manufacturing plant was bid out at about 3 weeks of field work with traditional techniques, total station, robotic, measurements, distometers, 3 people in the field, driving back and forth 30 miles every day to the site, every day obviously from the site. Instead of spending those 3 weeks, we went out there with a scanner and we were able to finish the 12 hours with 2 scanners. 600,000 square feet, we were able to finish in those 12 hours. Now, in the 12 hours, we barely impacted the actual production. Whenever there's any kind of issue for environmental exposure, obviously you don't have to linger. You can leave the scanner in its position, remote trigger it. So you see at the very bottom of that diagram, it says remote data collection. You don't have to be right there where it's taking measurements. So you're not kneeling down with a tape measure or, God forbid, I don't know, driving a nail or marking a target on the wall. It's actually doing it for you. You're using 2 people instead of 3 or 4 people because all you need is move the actual scanner to the position where you need to collect data, and then just pre-planning your next step ahead. And you are doing it in a matter of minutes. We're not talking hours. We're talking every occupation will take you, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5, depending on what kind of detail you're looking for, minutes to collect everything. So that safety factor is a big deal in acquiring something like this, which allows you to not be, we're not talking about loss of health or life or hazards or hazardous conditions. That's a huge factor in this. I will throw in one more example very quickly. Road surveys. You don't have to run into traffic. There's no need for you to go into traffic to capture the center of the road because you need to get the road profile. You have traffic flowing freely, 200 million points that you have acquired. Let's say 2 or 3 million will be on the traffic. But imagine that. That means you only have about 1 to 1.5% of traffic to deal with, and you have 98 to 99% of the solid surface that you can still extract. So that is a big deal in convincing your clients, convincing your partners that this is something useful for what you're doing right now. And then, of course, at the end, nowadays, well, in the past, of course, you were able to do 2D deliverables. You can deliver your plans on paper. You were able to, and you're still obviously able to do that nowadays. You were able to do maybe 3D prints for architectural purposes, but with point clouds. At the top left over here, you see I have a 2D plan that's a building face and a floor plan for a building, which is overlaid on top of an ortho image. And that ortho image is collected from, guess where? It was taken by a scan field book or taking pictures. It's automatically in that data set already for you. If you need to provide complete CAD drawings to your clients who do not have the ability to visualize point clouds. At the top right over there, you have a CAD drawing, which is extracted after you take the point cloud, which is essentially the result of a 3D scan. Model on top of it, create solid entities, and at that point you create out of millions to billions of points really only a few objects that are useful for customers in the long run, in the after process, after you've actually collected the data. And we've also had a lot of customers who are interested in clash detection, and clash detection is something that they do on their own, and when they do that on their own, they need some data to actually load into. Do you provide them with? It's a point cloud, so it's in the center. At that point, you really don't have to do anything. You just collect your data, put it together, and sell it to the customer. And then fancy other data collection tools allow you also to create. At the bottom left over here, we have a 3D hologram. People have been now recently super excited about the fact that you don't have to 3D print your objects, but you just print them into a hologram and take that hologram, roll it up with you, and take it to the presentation for you. It's a wow factor. It might not be something that you're talking about on an everyday basis to a production or a company that's actually buying something from you, but it is something that they can present, saying this is what we have done. And last, I don't even have it on this slide, is as far as I can tell, every website or every project that you create can also create the website environment for you, which you can upload. You can do fly-throughs through your data, and it's again something that elevates the ability of you giving the end user not just that flat 2D rolled up good old-fashioned archived piece of paper, but you're giving them all these other opportunities to manipulate, show off, showcase, and sell this data. And I guess all this then dials back down to what Shaheed's going to be talking about now in the next slide, is how you actually get to these points.
Okay, so you did the hard stuff. You convinced the owner of your company, the presidents, vice presidents, that it's time to make the jump into technology, to get the laser scanner, the equipment, to make the investment. So you get up now to your workflow, and before you get too involved with this industry, you have to understand the workflow in general as things are going to go, as well as the workflow for your particular company or environment and what exactly you want to do. It's going to become one of the most important aspects of getting into the scanning industry, because if it breaks down then, if things happen, if people aren't understanding, the field work aspect of it or the registration aspect of it, that's when things break down. That's when people start to get frustrated and, give up. And I've been in situations with this, in the scanning industry where people just say, hey, it's too much, it's too cumbersome, it's a lot of data, I don't know what to do with the data, I don't know what software to use, I don't know this, that. So I think if, once you can understand a workflow, get something in hand, go with it, that's when you start to make progress in this particular industry and start making the money. So no two jobs are the same, just like, but in the laser scanning industry, as you're going along, so you're having to deal with the the advantages and disadvantages of doing certain things, trying new things, getting new equipment, learning it on a job, and putting all that stuff into practice. And like I said, learning new things. Like if you look at the picture on the left with the gentleman there with the, 11, 12-foot rod with a scanner in the air, that seemed like a great idea, but for that particular incident, it might not have, because that was a sort of windy day. And, we saw that the scans that were taken from that particular field day were kind of scrubby a little bit. There were some data collection issues, so we had to go back out and actually rescan that. So that's just a situation where, you really have to take what you learn from each particular scanning project in the beginning and put all that information into practice. Yeah. So the bulk of what we're going to be talking about from now to the end of the presentation is that investment. There's going to be an investment in time. There's a lot of time involved with this particular industry. You can't just hand somebody a scanner and a software package and expect them to come up with the deliverables that Lukas talked about a little while ago. You have to spend some time. You got to learn the product, learn what's going on, learn what are the different environments that people, your clients, are going to want to see the data in, and then you got to be able to put that into practice. Capital, obviously, a huge investment in capital is going to be expected when getting into this industry, but as you'll see later on in the presentation, that capital is going to pay off in the end. And people, obviously, is going to be a huge factor. People who are, who want to learn, who are interested in this industry, we find are people that are going to be successful in creating a scanning program that's successful.
Well, to build on what Shaheed was saying, the time investment, this is what's the most important. Do your research. You're going to have to find what is the best product for the work that you do. And while you're doing that, you might as well look into the company that's going to support you. Without that support, you're almost setting yourself up to fail. This is a technology that you're going to need help with. It's not something that you're just going to break out of the box one day and set it up and you're going to be scanning and making millions of dollars with it. It takes time, it takes a lot of effort, and you're going to need that support along the way. And do your homework on the staff. Like Shaheed was saying, you really got to find that right person. It's kind of like what me and Lukas were talking about earlier. You kind of got to find that tech geek, that one person that is really interested in electronics, really interested in software, and that's the person you want to put this scanner in the hands of. You just can't drop this equipment in somebody's hands and tell them to go scan. If they don't have an interest in it, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for you to make money with that individual. So
finding people that actually understand the 3D environment that you're going to be working in is a challenge already. So, and in a lot of cases, when you're teaching entry-level people, that's the first thing you have to teach them on the office, and is, don't think in just drawing point, but you have to think of being inside that 3D environment, and once that clicks, I think a lot of your kind of develop a lot better.
Yeah, without that 3D knowledge or that 3D awareness, it's a hard thing to teach somebody if they've never been involved in that. It's a slow process, and you got to really do your homework on the person that you're looking at putting this in the hands of. If they struggle with, just in general, just struggle with geometry and shapes, this may not be the right tool for them to work with. So it's one of those things you really need to look at who you're putting in charge of this equipment. And the other thing is, you got to decide starting out, is this something that you want to try, or is this something you want to jump headfirst into? And it's when you get into, do I rent to get a taste of it and see how it's going to go, or do I just jump head first, buy all the equipment up front. So it comes down to the firm itself. It's what you're comfortable with and what you up front. Sometimes it's just better to rent to get started with, and sometimes it might be better for you to purchase and get the tax benefits of it.
And now imagine that you're actually looking at these 4 bullets over here on this slide, and you're not even talking about, we're really not talking about money. We're really talking about spending the time to find whoever you need to find out, do the research on the purchasing, to find out the right people. This is all just time concern. Now, the next factor that you have to talk about is obviously the actual investment, the hardware. Besides doing the rental or maybe some try it or buy it program, you decide, all right, I am going to be involved in this size project based on the size of project that you have identified that you might want to try a scanner on. These are the 3, or in this case, I guess 4 pieces of hardware that Faro makes that would help you accomplish this. So at the very far left, you have a freestyle handheld scanner, which is the entry-level point cloud solution for collecting data in 3D environment in a colored environment, which means it's not only just taking the 3D space into consideration, but it's actually coloring everything properly with RGB values. So you get a point cloud out of it, but you do have limitations to it. The freestyle on the very far left can only scan up to about 10 to 12 feet from where you're holding it, and it will only scan smaller rooms, maybe smaller objects, maybe probably lunchbox size objects, and bigger. It's used for cramped spaces. If you're doing mechanical rooms, if you're trying to do something where you cannot stick an instrument or a rodman into, as far as, okay, capture this and capture that, and it's hard to take individual measurements on. You would want to view something like that. If you're into large scale scanning, larger than just about 10 to 12 feet, now you start talking, all right, significantly more money, but a much more efficient device at that. So Focus 3D line of products that Faro makes, the X30, the X130, and the X330 are the next line of defense for you if you're actually trying to get into this data capture. The numbers at the end of the model names actually help you decide, all right, if I'm most likely to be capturing data in small cramped spaces and areas that I do not need large expanses scanned, you would be fine to go with the X30, which can only scan up to 30 meters, but it might be perfectly enough for what you can do. It still captures millions of points per second. Sorry, not millions, it's about 976,000 points per second exactly. But it's plenty. They all capture that much data per second, but they're limited by the modulation of the laser that they use to actually probe and measure distance. So the X130 can go about 130 meters. It's for medium-sized scans where you can go large hallways and outside expanses where you can get closer to objects that you need to scan. But for example, the very last scanner over there, the X330, is useful for if you're trying to do bridges and you have an abutment and you can't get in the water to get any closer. At that point, scanning at 330 meters, which is about 1,000 feet out, you are able to get the detail without having to build an island or get closer to the top of a tower. If the tower is, I don't know, 200 or 300 or 400 feet high, and you need to get the detail on the top of it. So this is where you decide what kind of hardware would be useful for you. And again, from experience, you can do whole mechanical rooms with just the freestyle. If you have the time and you have the patience to hold that freestyle in your hand and hover around for a couple of minutes, if not hours, to get the detail, where if you get a Focus 3D, any one of the following actual scanners, they might be done in a half hour without you having to have a very tired arm by having to hold the little handheld scanner. And then when we're still talking about the investment. Once you decide on the hardware, you also have to anticipate a little bit of expense that has to do with accessories that go with it. Sometimes it's really just paper targets, which you can print thousands, millions of on a copier. But perhaps you need solid targets, reflectors, maybe spheres, maybe some specialty tripods, maybe some mounts to mount your scanner upside down into a manhole, or have it above plenum space, above a drop at the speed. What am I trying to say? Drop the ceiling. Well, of course, at that point, you're also talking about once you have everything scanned and you have all the accessories, what am I going to be working with the data in? The thing that I tell everybody, you do not want to underestimate the power that is necessary for working in 3D. So the computer that can handle the point cloud is something that you don't want to cheap out on, as far as purchasing something that, oh yeah, right now is a gaming computer, was 3 years ago, and it should still work today. No, really get what you can get for when you're making an investment of $60 or $70 or $80,000, or you know, in the $100,000 range. A $2,000 or $3,000 computer is not a big investment, and it will make your life so much easier afterwards also. And because you're going to be collecting this large amount of data, your external or your internal storage will definitely need to be addressed also. And this is on top of if you actually create the project and the project is finished, and you are not going to be deleting all the data. You're actually going to, or ideally, keep an archive of everything that you've done, because, again, now we're going back to this timing issue. If that client that you delivered a drawing to, or their final model to, comes back and says, oh, by the way, are you able to give me the inverts, or are you able to give me the heights of those buildings or the buildings around it? And you say, wow, I can, but you can charge him field time for actually going in the field, yet you pull it up in the on your computer from the external storage, open up that file, give it to him without actually going to have to go in the field. And that's the power of that archive and the power of that 3D data that you have captured before. So that's the hardware part of purchasing scanning, and now John can talk about the actual software part, which is a big deal again.
Yeah, this is the other part that's going to drive the cost of getting into scanning. You have to look at your registration software. A lot of the scanner manufacturers out there, they add that in as an accessory to the package, whereas Faro, when you purchase a Faro scanner, that is included. So keep that in mind when you're looking at getting into scanning. That registration software is a must-have. You just can't scan without it. Without that software, all you have is a bunch of point data that you can't do anything with. The other thing you need to really keep in mind when you're getting into scanning is your software that you're using right now. Is it up to date? Is your AutoCAD or is your Bentley software current? That's where a lot of people run into problems. I've had clients, they'll call me up and say, John, please go out and scan this job for me, and all I want is the point cloud from you. And I deliver the point cloud, and then they realize that their software isn't up to date, and they have no way of bringing the point cloud data into their software, because I've seen clients where they're still running Land Desktop, and we're now on Civil 3D 2015, and they had no way to even work with this point cloud. So then it comes back, well, can you model this for me? Well, then, because I have the up-to-date software, I'm able to efficiently work with this data, and I'm able to extract the information out of it. You also have to look at that extraction software. There's various packages out there, and depending on what you're using for your base AutoCAD product or your Bentley product, that's going to determine what other add-on packages that you're going to use for data extraction. If you're going to use AutoCAD, look at, and you're going with a Faro scanner, look at Faro Qubit. Qubit Point Sense Plant allows you to do all your data extraction with relatively ease. I mean, it's not difficult if you understand the 3D environment. They also have an add-on package called VirtuServe. And VirtuServe is kind of like your heads-up display, kind of like a photogrammetry person. They're able to open the photo images from the scanner, and you're able to basically digitize accurately to the point cloud with this heads-up display at the same time you have your AutoCAD drawing open. So it kind of works hand in hand, allowing you to efficiently extract this data. I mean, it just comes down to time savings. If you got the right tools, you're able to extract things efficiently. And there are also add-on packages for the registration software. If you're just doing stockpile calculations, or if you're doing floor flatness surveys for ADA and compliance checks, you can add these add-on packages to your registration software and it'll generate the reports for you. You don't even have to bring the stuff into your CAD package. So you got to look at what you're doing and what's going to be the best tools. I mean, it's kind of having a toolbox with all the right tools in it. So it's one of these things, make sure you got the right stuff before you start out. If not, you're just setting yourself up for failure. And with all this software, you always got to have it. You got to have that support behind you. So when you select that manufacturer, you select that vendor that's going to get you into this market. Just see what they have to offer. I know from my personal experience, Faro and their Qubit team, top notch. I can call them at any time, send them an email at any given hour, and they'll respond. And you can't ask for any better support than that. And you got to really set yourself up to basically have all this in place so that there's no more issues with basically wasting time is what it comes down to. If you get all this set up, you get all the training in place, you're not going to lose anything. So you got to look at your hardware while you're doing this as well. I mean, if your hardware and your software aren't up to date, make sure you have these warranty packages in place that will allow you to keep all this in up to date, up to maintenance, and it's setting yourself up for success.
John just mentioned a little while ago the concept of tools in the toolbox. It's exactly the way we should look at it, but you also have to figure out how to finance those tools in that toolbox. So there are a couple ways to do it, and it's really a business investment decision at this point. Renting and owning both are two valid options. Obviously, renting, you're going to have, you're not taking on that initial, outflow of capital, and your investment up front is not substantial. It gives you an opportunity to learn the equipment, learn what to do with it, learn the environment in which you're going to be working. But it's also an opportunity to, like I said, just get to know the industry and get out there and gather projects and let the projects dictate whether or not you're actually going to be able to rent or own that particular equipment. Equipment or renting is also, it has its advantages and disadvantages as well as owning. Renting, you may obviously not get the exact same unit you had before, which, depending on what you're doing, may cause some, not problems, but it may, depending on what you're doing, it may have issues. You may have scheduling issues as well. You may not get the same manufacturer. You may get a different type of equipment. You may get what's left in the cabinet at the end of the day. So renting has its disadvantages as well. But if you can invest that capital up front, you're going to be able to alleviate some of those issues and actually have that control to be able to schedule as you like, know your equipment, know the limitations, know how far you can push that particular equipment in order to make it do what you need to do for that particular project you're working on. Also, software is a big issue, not an issue, but it's a big thing right now, because you can actually rent the software on a monthly basis, even a project basis, in order to be able to get stuff done. So renting makes it a little easier for the little guy to be able to get into this industry and not have to get that outflow of capital all up front.
All right. Now that we've actually spoken about, the time and then the capital, last section over here is talking about the people, and it's really the people who make this whole possible. I know you can have the money, all the money in the world, and all the time in the world, but if you get the wrong people, it's not going to, account for anything. So getting people who are willing to adapt to this new technology is a big key to it, and thinking outside the box. And I don't know if everybody can actually see that little picture on the right of this slide. This happens to be a really good customer of ours, who I managed to see in action while we were scanning what was it, a project somewhere down in Richmond. And they needed to get a solution somehow figured out to scan from really up high, because they wanted to avoid the fact that there's trees in the way and there's bushes in the way, and they just needed to get better data. And at that point, of course, you can go to the manufacturer and ask them, do you have a solution for it? But because this is such a new industry, frequently you get an answer, yes, we have something in the works, but it's not really actually something that we have. And at that point, if you are thinking outside the box like my guys over here, they said, okay, let's just go into a Home Depot or a Lowe's, get or what is it, 2 or 3 inch pipe, weld it together or put it together, mount it to one of these Gator little ATVs, and put the scanner on top. And because you can remote trigger this thing, you can actually scan from up top over there. So again, you don't want to have a person involved who says, oh, stop, I can't do this because they don't give me the right tools. You do have to think outside the box for this. The best person for this is definitely, just like John mentioned before, somebody who's a geeky guy. Somebody, unfortunately, that typically means somebody who's younger, who might have been in the generation of the playing video games, 3D video games, because even though I mention it as a fun factor over here, it really does make a difference. It is something that allows them to navigate in this space and not be afraid of it. Frequently when we work with the wrong people, or the people who are afraid of it, they're still stuck in, okay, we have a 3D environment over here, but can you please give me just 2D? And yes, of course the ability is there, but you cannot underestimate the fact that this is all in 3D data. This is all 3D data, all captured in one project. When you're getting people involved in scanning and looking, you also want to look into if they have the ability to kind of interpolate. If they have a CAD background, they can interpolate and they can figure out, okay, once I'm out here, what do I actually need to capture to make the office guys or the guys who are going to be doing the drawing successful and faster? And if they have a background in CAD, this might actually help them. Also, a surveying background, not completely necessary depending on what you're actually doing, but it does make a difference because, again, they have this 3D spatial awareness around them where they know, okay, you're going from point A to point B, how do you get there, and what kind of control do I actually need out of it? And it does make a difference. When we're talking about the right people, once you actually find them, you want to, I'll skip the first bullet over here, and we'll mention it at the end, but you do want to give them the right tools. Obviously, you're going to be scanning a tower. It is possible, but it's really not something efficient that you would want to do. So providing the people who you have selected for this, who are the right types with the right equipment, is definitely important. Obviously with the targets and the laptop and the tripods and anything that's necessary, have them be comfortable with what they have and what they are using. Get them properly trained by the manufacturer, by the support channels, have them reading all these magazines and get them subscriptions to everything. And this is why I skipped the very first bullet over here. Once you do invest this time and this effort into these people, please, we've seen this too many times. Everybody gets very excited about scanning. They get all trained, and everybody knows, or they know what they need to know. You, as the company owner who's investing in this technology and in these people, you may want to look into having them sign these non-competes or NDAs, because once a person figures out this, as I call it, the secret sauce behind how to work with scanning, they will realize what kind of value they bring into the company, and they will be happy to leave. And when they leave, now you may actually, will probably not take the equipment with them, but they will leave you with that equipment in the company, and now you will have an investment in your hand, which you're making payments on, but you will have nobody to run it. So this is something that, again, when you protect yourself, you protect the equipment, but you also protect yourself from these people who you train leaving your company.
Well-qualified, experienced people within a scan program are really hard to find. I know a lot of companies that are scan outfits that are always asking me, do you know anybody looking? Do you know anybody that needs a job? They're not out there looking for jobs, you know. So you have people who are approaching, you know, people that have jobs with better opportunities. That's why it's important to consider the non-disclosure agreements, because like Lukas said, you protect your own interests, and you know, limit those people's ability to be able to take what they learned from you somewhere else.
And then the last thing that I want to mention, because it is something that gets overlooked easily, if you have the right people and you're covered with all the NDAs and everything that you need, and you're ready to start, do not make it restrictive. Do not restrict the technology. Let them take it home. Let them take the scanner and scan the office and scan their environments, because by playing with this equipment, you will be learning the necessary skills that will then help you become much more proficient, much faster, much more in what you're doing as far as, you know, professional work. And I have mentioned this before, that support that you get from direct and even indirect channels is unbelievably important. I have guys who I like to talk to as far as support, because I like to develop this personal relationship. You don't want to have guys who are involved in scanning who are afraid to ask questions because they said, well, we have support, but they never respond, or we don't know them. If you have this personal relationship with these people, you don't mind calling them, and they don't mind actually talking to you. So develop this if you can. Get involved with a company that can offer you this kind of help, and that can offer you this kind of you know, support backbone, if you want to call it that. And then I guess Shaheed can touch on the last resource, which we will talk about.
Well, resources in general, resources that are out there and publicly available are of paramount importance to the individual who have been trained and are learning to be able to get better at this particular profession. And your dealer, your reseller, make him your best friend. He's the person that trained you. He has experience, at least on the technical side, and he should be able to show you some of the issues you may have and help you out with them. Or if he doesn't know what the answers are for some of the questions, he can find the answer for you. And don't forget about the manufacturer. The people who actually made the equipment are good resources. They have engineers, they have software technicians and software engineers out there who are taking the information that they're seeing on these public forums and using it to better the software. So if you have issues with software, you have resources out there. Laser Scanning Forum is a very valuable resource. It's where people go where they have questions, and you know, other people who have encountered the same problems, help them out and show them what to do for those particular issues. So I think once you get people trained, and once they know what they're doing, and they're playing around with stuff, and they have problems or specific problems that are just they're having. In most cases, it's not just a problem that another person out there somewhere hasn't come across, and people in this industry are talking. It's a very small industry right now, and they're talking to each other. They're helping each other solve problems within the software and the hardware side of things. So make sure you have your resources in place, people you can call, people where you're out in the field and there's some problems. You should be able to to call your local dealer or your reseller or someone who actually sold you the equipment to help you out and to walk you through a particular issue that you may be having with the hardware.
One other thing we want to add to that is user conferences. User conferences helps, one thing, keeps the morale of your guys up. It keeps them in the know what's going on, what's coming out in the future in the industry. So don't overlook these user conferences when your staff come to you and say, hey, I want to go to SPAR 2016 or I want to go to Ferro User Conference. Don't shy away from that. That actually benefits your people because that helps them build those unique relationships with the vendors and the manufacturers. A lot of times when, like for instance, me and Shaheed, we both attended SPAR this past year. And it was nice to be able to go out there and finally meet a lot of the vendors and the manufacturers face to face because we had these relationships already. So being able to get that face-to-face time with these people is invaluable because you can call on that later on. There's been times I've gotten into a jam, jumped on Twitter and hit one of those contacts up, and within 10 minutes I had a solution to my problem. So don't overlook those user conferences.
Because you're dealing with people, or you're interacting with people that have the same equipment, the same software. So if they're encountering the same issues, it's, they may have already have a solution to those problems.
So let's talk about return on investment. I want to share with you a real quick story here, and this will give you an idea of what kind of return on investment you can see. We had a project a couple years ago where we were just getting started into scanning. And we had bid this job as a conventional survey job. It was a large urban intersection, and they needed some topo around this bus area, and it had a passenger waiting area. So we figured it would take approximately 5 to 6 days of two-man conventional crew time and a couple weeks of office time because they also needed ADA surveys of all the four corners of this intersection. Well, we looked at it and we said, well, let's try scanning this. There's just so much information we got to pick up. Let's try scanning it. And if it doesn't work, then we'll send the conventional crew back out. So the very first day, I grabbed a Ferro scanner, I went out to the site, and within 5 hours, I had collected all the data on the site to the point where I actually had enough information that I could actually read the casting manufacturers of all the drainage structures in the site. Came back, we developed our plans within roughly a week, but we were still able to build this job out as if we did it as a conventional job. And when it was all done, we actually made a substantial amount of money on this project. So that's where you're going to see your return on investment. It's a time savings tool. And the nice thing about it, the client came back and said, hey, we need some more information from you. We need to know where all the entrances are on the adjoining buildings because we want to be able to raise the sidewalks up and lower some of the sidewalks for ADA compliance. So if we raise the sidewalk, we want to make sure we're not going to impact any door openings in this urban environment. Us being able to go back to that point cloud and harvest that information. We didn't have to go back to the field again. So that's where you're going to make your money, is being able to go back and harvest that information. So that's where you're going to see the return on your investment, is being able to basically harvest continuously out of that point cloud and only have to go in the field one time.
I guess, yeah, if you look at this last slide, you just realize that when you're getting into 3D, you're getting into data that you collect today that you can use in the future for tomorrow's use or for however long you actually want it. You're capturing today for the future. You're capturing it for historical preservation. You're capturing it for your own archive, and it is something that you can use forever from the point when you've actually captured it to whenever you actually need it in the future. So, I don't know, I think we're kind of done. So I think we can hand this over to Roland if we have any kind of questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. You did a fantastic job. I'd like to go ahead and open this up to questions. We have gotten a number of questions from our listeners. First of all, one of the what a lot of people seem to want to know is what is the best software to process point clouds? This particular listener is using Civil 3D. What is the best software for the registration of point clouds?
Well, it comes down to the hardware that you're using. I always try to stay with the manufacturer of the scanner. So if I'm using a Faro scanner, I'm going to use Faro Scene. I'm going to make sure I'm on my most current version of Faro Scene, which is 5.5 now. And once I've completed my registration process, I'll export my registered cloud out as either an FLS file or an Autodesk recap file, bring that into Autodesk recap, and then attach that recap file into Civil 3D.
Okay. If I can, I'll interject it really quickly. That scene software is, just like John mentioned, quite powerful because you're thinking, okay, I can only work with 20 or 30 or 40 scans because that's the size of my project. I have had projects where I work with 1,400 scans and it's still an efficient process. If you do it right, you can do massive amounts of data over here. So yeah, stick with that manufacturer software. That's what I've learned.
Okay. Okay, well, and now I guess obviously this program has been somewhat Faro focused. One listener's asking lots of focus on Faro hardware here. Are they the market leader? Who else is a valid player in this hardware market? As well as potential other possibly third-party software that might be beneficial. Can you speak to that at all?
Well, you also have Leica has scanners. You have Regal that has scanners. You have Zoller Froelich that manufacture scanners. Topcon, Trimble, almost all the survey manufacturers have some kind of entry-level scanner right now that you can look at.
Okay. Yeah, I mean there are obviously there are lots of other vendors, and I think one of the points that you made, John, early on in the presentation is that it is incumbent to do your research and your due diligence and to establish those relationships before making any kind of major investment. I've got another question here. Okay, so we can do a few more. Any recommendations for the best LiDAR devices to use on drones? If I'm flying LiDAR sensors on drones, do I also need a ground-based scanner to get the complete picture?
Well, let me interject over here. Yes, you can obviously get LiDAR sensors on drones. At that point, you would probably not necessarily use the ones that are used for stationary data capture. Those tend to be heavy. Those tend to be somewhat bulky. But there are manufacturers, for example, Velodyne, that creates small scanners that can be mounted on mobile platforms, even drones. And if you want to get more detail, again, remember, whenever you're flying any kind of LiDAR device, you're actually sacrificing the accuracy for the amount of data that you're capturing. So you will be able to capture a lot of data because it'll be flying, but that accuracy that a stationary scanner has while it's sitting on a tripod and spinning 360 degrees is probably, I would say, about 5 to 10-fold worse. So if you have a scanner that gives you accuracy of plus or minus 2 or 3 millimeters on the ground, when it's flown, the same kind of equipment will probably give you accuracy to within about a centimeter and a half, depending again on what you're using. So combination of both. We have done that before. We have done photogrammetry with drones, and we have merged it with ground-based scanners just to get the kind of detail that we want on the surfaces of the walls, combined with this vast expanse of data that we have captured with drones. So you can definitely combine them. It's really up to what you're trying to do and the detail that you're after.
Yeah, exactly. Just as you say, it depends on the application and what it is you're trying to achieve. But I think increasingly too, people are finding that one solution doesn't cover every problem, and so potentially for a potential project, you may require an overhead scene as well as up close and and ground scenes. And so I think that would probably necessitate the use of aerial and potentially ground. Another question here, how do you define data ownership contractually? Does the service provider typically own the data, or should I expect that the client will want ownership?
I would say that you would have to figure out in the agreement process. I mean, it's probably, in my experience, been a combination of both. I mean, I've been on both sides where the client wants to own the data and they don't want you to, for instance, use that data for any kind of marketing purposes or confidentiality type situation. So I think if it's in your agreement or your contract that, you know, it's your data, I think it's safe that, you know, you can say that you own it.
We've had instances where when we go and actually scan something for a client, the contract says once we're done, we are obligated, and they are actually overseeing us to show them the data, show them that we're actually deleting the data, we're getting rid of it, we're formatting the drive that it was saved on, we're formatting the SD cards or the drives that we've stored it on because it's confidential information, for example. They won't let you keep the pictures that are being taken with it. So again, just like Shaheed mentioned, it is something that is not universally everybody's using it the same way. In this case, it was something that before we even started scanning, we had it in the contract and we knew what we were getting ourselves into and how to manage that data.
Okay, very good. I think maybe we take maybe a couple more. I know, let's see, I have one gentleman said, I wanted to start ASAP. I have the people and the equipment, but how to start? And I think this is probably more of a general business question, and also maybe relates to, you know, where are the greatest opportunities? Where is the low-hanging fruit in terms of for people who want to get into this business? And I guess too, maybe it'd be good to add a caution that, you know, just for somebody to just come out of the blue and to buy this equipment and software and start laser scanning, I think is a pretty tough way to go. And I think one of the messages that comes through here from, you know, all three gentlemen are saying is that basically you're incorporating this technology to actually benefit your existing business, your existing surveying and engineering business, as opposed to just coming off the street and starting to say, hey, you know, here, I'll be your laser scanner. Can you maybe, you know, whatever, speak to that issue a little bit?
I think you're exactly right. I think when starting out, your existing clientele and your existing projects are going to be your primary means of work. I think if you can implement situations where you can use the scanner in order to shave time, field time for a particular project or something like that, I think is where you will best use the scanner, and then at the same time you can actually, you know, look for other means in which to be able to forward the business of your scanning business itself. But I think your existing client are going to be your primary meat and potatoes when starting out.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, I think we're running a little bit past 2 o'clock. I think we probably should wrap things up. I'd like to thank all three of you for a fantastic presentation, an excellent webinar. I'd also like to thank everybody for attending and Faro for sponsoring this, and to point out that you know, LiDAR Magazine is going into its 6th year. We had attendees from all three of our spatial media outlets: LiDAR Magazine, American Surveyor, GISuser.com, and you know, please you know, keep an eye out for any for our future webinar series and a lot of other new exciting developments that are going to be coming out in the new year. Gentlemen, thank you very much, and hope you all have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.